Hi, I'm Batsheva Frankel from Overthrowing Education, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now. Shows on the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Welcome to a mini episode of the Educational Duct Tape Podcast. Mini episodes just like this one are released every other Wednesday and feature interviews with educators that were recorded live on location at a conference or event. Please subscribe to the show to make sure that you don't miss any of these episodes. And now, here's the host of the Educational Duct Tape Podcast, Jake Miller.
Hello, duct tapers. Welcome in. Before we get into today's mini episode interview, I'd like to remind you to listen to full episodes of the podcast to hear longer interviews with my guests, my soapbox moments, and content from listeners just like you, the duct tapers. Also, those longer episodes give you the chance to earn a certificate of listening, laughing, and learning that you could turn in for professional development credits. Mini episodes like this one that you're listening to right now, however, are not eligible for those credits simply because they're so short. However, what they lack in certificates and episode length, they make up for in awesomeness. Speaking of that awesomeness, let's travel back in time to today's interview, which was recorded live and on location at a conference or event.
Today's guest.
Okay, so I'm back here at the Teach Better conference with AJ Vambaketes. Met AJ this morning. AJ is from the St. Louis area. I'm excited to meet him here at Teach Better here in Ohio and chat with him a little bit about some educational duct tape. So before we get into that, AJ, why don't you give us a little background on who you are, what you do, stuff like that?
All right, I've been teaching 12 years in the St. Louis area. Teach middle school, 7th and 8th grade setting. I've taught every social studies course, and I got into computer science about 3 or 4 years ago through a curriculum program called Project Lead the Way, or PLTW.
I love PLTW, yeah.
Yeah. So
is there a focus in Project Lead the Way on computer science and stuff like that?
Yeah, they have like 3 different pathways. One is biomedicine, one is engineering, and then the third one is computer science.
Oh, so I'm most familiar with their engineering stuff. I didn't realize they had a computer science pathway now. That's really cool. So do you still teach PLTW, or you teach something else?
I haven't got to teach it this semester, but I'm hoping to teach it next semester. It's a course called Innovators and Makers.
Nice.
And we use MicroBits and stuff like that.
So you're social studies still, or that was in the past?
Social studies still.
And computer science and
like a tech coach in the afternoon.
Nice. You're wearing a lot of hats, right?
Lots of hats.
All right, so I'm going to ask you now an educational duct tape question. So for any listeners and for you, AJ, that might not know what educational duct tape is, it's my silly metaphor that educational technology is at its best when it's a tool that we're using to solve a problem or meet a goal or address a learning standard, not when it's the focus, but when it's a tool we're using for the focus. And, that's an interesting thing to talk about with a computer science guy before I dive into the question, is that when you walk into a computer science class, the tech kind of is the focus, but in reality, there's still a skill you're trying to develop, right? You're not just it's not just like learn to code.
Yeah, well, in that computer science class, they actually have physical computing. So when they download it to the MicroBit, there's extra inputs and outputs that they can set up. And the kids were doing really well with the coding and with their projects, but it was like a bunch of wires and duct tape.
Yeah, right.
So this last couple semesters, I've actually been going to yard sales and buying old toys, playhouses and stuff like that, and letting them use, little cars or doll houses to bring these projects to life a little bit more.
With the MicroBit? That's what you're using?
With the MicroBit.
Cool. So for those listeners that might not be familiar with a MicroBit, I've never gotten to play with one myself, but I'm aware of them. We want to share, the tweet of what they are. What's the...
So it's just a little credit card looking thing. It's got 25 built-in LED lights. It's got access to inputs and outputs on the bottom. There's a built-in compass, accelerometer. And so the kids use a coding program. We use makecode.org. Mm-hmm. And then they download it to MicroBit. And then eventually they learn how to code a little bit deeper. And they'll use external LEDs and little speakers and servos and pressure sensors and light sensors to to get all the things to work.
I love it. Awesome. That could have just been our question right there. Yeah, MicroBits are very cool. People should definitely check those out.
Like last semester, I had 2 girls that, they got a dollhouse and they created an alarm system. So we had the pressure sensor by the door. So when the door opened up, the pressure sensor would receive less pressure, which would cause an external LED light in one of the windows to flash. And on the MicroBit, the scrolling message would say intruder.
Wow.
And then when the pressure was set to a certain number, then it would just have a normal light, like a white light. I think it was red whenever it was being intruder. And then the MicroBit would just say armed rather than intruder.
Very cool. So
and then there was also a speaker that they used too to
make a noise.
To
So even in that situation, they're trying to solve a problem, not just learn to use the tool, right?
Yeah, PLTW is all project-based. They do a good job of scaffolding the activities, and then once you get through the activities, the kids are ready to get out of their way and see what they can do.
Nice, really cool. So I actually have a question I was supposed to ask you, but I feel like that could have been our question. But I'm going to ask you this other one anyhow. Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay, so how can we use gamification in a middle school setting? So there are ways that gamification can be done, analog, no tech required at all. But let's talk about it from a tech perspective. How would you use technology to do gamification?
All right, well, a couple years ago, I went to a session about a digital breakout activity, and I kind of took that and tweaked it to make it more gamified. So I get a Google drawing, and I'll impose a GIF that I get from Google.
It's GIF.
GIF. I know. I heard you saying that in your earlier session. But
No, you're good. You're good either way.
A GIF, and then I'll make some shapes, and I'll hide them inside the pictures, make them transparent, and link them to either some app or to a Google document where they have to do some type of task or activity, and then I use.
Why are they GIFs? Is it just to liven up the
yeah, I mean, you could just have like the first one I made was the original Donkey Kong screen with Mario or Jumping Man at the bottom, and you don't need the GIF, but I feel like the kids like it more.
Yeah, that's a hook,
and I like it more too.
Okay.
So I use it with my learning management system, Schoology, that has completion rules, and then so they have to go in the correct order.
I'm going to interrupt you on that because that is my favorite feature of Schoology. So the district I work at used to use Schoology, and that's the biggest thing I miss it for. Like in a lot of ways, like if you're going to choose between Schoology and Google Classroom and whatever else, they're all great tools.
Yeah.
But that is Schoology's, at least in my opinion, my favorite feature.
I just jumped right into Schoology, so I never did the Google Classroom and then Schoology, and I've done Canvas for my online master's courses a couple years ago, but I've never been able to use it, so I didn't know that Schoology was the only one that had the completion rule feature.
So explain what that looks like for a non-Schoology user.
So you set it up where kids have to get a certain score or at least make a submission before they can progress on in my case, in the game or just in the activities.
Right. So for each page or video or activity you put in, you could say like they either have to view it or they have to complete it or they have to score above an 80% on it, whatever it is. So I think of that as being mastery-based instruction, but you're using that for gamification, right?
Yeah, like so if you can picture the Donkey Kong screen, Mario has to go up the ladders, so I'll hide them shapes and the hyperlinks in those. And if they try to skip and go to the very top, they'll get the private access message because it's connected to the Schoology completion rules. So that's how I keep them going and kind of scaffold the lessons and the activities.
So the drawings that you made with the GIFs in them, those are embedded into Schoology.
So they're using they could use just one picture with 10, 20 activities for maybe a couple weeks. And, they just, have to figure out where they left off, go there and try to find the hidden link. Sometimes it's hidden. Sometimes I tell them where it's at. They click on and they just pick up where they're at. So some kids may be on level 4 and other kids may be on level 2. And then I could go into Schoology and kind of check that so I can kind of zero in on some students during class and try to catch them up to the other students.
Nice. I love that.
And so now I've done a Donkey Kong Jr. screen with the vines. And now I just did Super Mario Brothers 3 with the maps, so they got to go to the different stages, and instead of them going into the Super Mario levels, they're actually going to an activity.
Yeah, you should do Super Mario Brothers 2, where they're throwing radishes and doing a whole bunch of things that don't really make sense.
I never liked Super Mario Brothers 2. I like the original, and then I like 3 with the tail, where you can fly. But
because
I never
of course
got
a raccoon tail makes you fly, right?
The raccoon tail was nice. I don't know how that related. You got it by getting a feather.
Right. Or was it a leaf? I think it was a leaf.
It might have been a
leaf that gave you a raccoon tail that made you fly. I've never seen a powered leaf or a flying raccoon. But
that's probably why I liked it so much. It didn't make sense to me.
All right, well, that's really cool. AJ, thank you for being on the show. I really appreciate you sharing today.
Appreciate your session today, and like the podcast too. Big fan.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the Educational Duct Tape Podcast. Please visit eduducttape.com to join the discussion, share possible topics, inquire about being a guest, or contact Jake. And remember, duct is spelled with a T, not a quack quack K.